Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel. The case that I'm going to be looking into today is the Mongelli case. This case sent shockwaves across Italy, and it was actually dubbed as the Italian Fritzl, obviously Italy's version of the Joseph Fritzl case. This case was suggested by Cade, so thank you for that. I appreciate any suggestions you guys have. I'd just like to let you know, I mean no disrespect whatsoever about anyone I'm going to talk about today. I've just gathered this information from the internet and compiled it into a video for educational purposes. I'd just like to say, if I pronounce any of these names incorrectly, I apologise. I have looked it up on how it's said, but there's not any videos on this or anything like that, and so I've just tried my best. So, Michele Mongelli was born in 1945. The family was initially from Foggia in Italy, in southern Italy, but moved to Turin after he found a job selling scrap metal. He had 10 children in total, I do believe, with his wife, Caterina. From what I could find, they actually had 8 sons and 2 daughters, and he wasn't at all the loving father as you would expect. Instead, he abused some, potentially all of his kids. I don't know how far this went. The others claim that he did nothing to them, and so I don't know. Again, not sure whether the other children suffered at his hand, but one of his sons and his eldest daughter certainly did. And for legal reasons, his eldest daughter was given the name Laura in the media, so that's how I'm going to refer to her as, because we just don't know her name. So he would go on to sexually abuse Laura over the course of 25 years. And he would also groom his son to do the same. He groomed him to not only abuse his sister, but to also subject his own young children to horrific acts. It all began for Laura at the age of 9, when, and I quote, "he began to touch my intimate parts whilst kissing me." She was held in a flat in a pretty much pitch black room with no electricity, obviously against her will, and she would only be allowed out with her father's company. At the age of 16, he forced her to fully engage in sexual acts with him. She was forced to sleep in the same room as him because he wanted to have her near him all the time, right next to his bed. Let me just say here, I have no idea what went on with the other kids or the wife, where she was at this point. I don't know if she was aware of it, if she agreed with it, if she partook in it, or if she was just totally unaware, but I find it really hard to believe that she was totally unaware. If they all lived together, which I assume they did, but again, I don't know, and she wasn't ever allowed out of the room for like 25 years, unless she was with him, I just find it odd and strange that somebody's not aware something bad is going on. So I don't know whether she knew or not, who knows. In 1994, Laura actually escaped the room that she was being held captive in, and she went on to tell the police that she was being abused. The really sad thing here is that they didn't believe her. Michele would go on to claim that his daughter's statements were completely fictional, which of course he's going to do. If he's abusing his daughter, he's not going to admit to it, he's going to say she's lying. But again, if he wasn't abusing his daughter and she's claiming that he is, he's going to also do the same. He's going to say that he's not doing it, because he's not, but in this case he was. This man was far from innocent of these crimes. Either way, he had Laura seen by psychologists, and they actually concluded that she was disturbed, and so her claims were ignored, and back she went to her abusive father to be held captive for years to come. Her living conditions were likened to that of slavery and mistreatment. As a result of being abused and held captive, of course she wasn't allowed to go to school, and she received very little in the way of education. Not only was her abuse physical and sexual, it was also psychological. It seemed that in this family, they felt that it was their right of droit de seigneur, which actually translates to Lord's right, of the father over the daughter. So he felt it was his right to do these things to her because he was a dad, and it was his right to do it, of course. That kind of just reinforces to me that the family knew about it. But again, whether they did or whether they didn't, again, I couldn't find anything as to whether they were abused, whether they were older and had moved out and maybe that's why they didn't know. I just don't know. There's very little on this case. I've tried my best to find all the information that I could. I searched pretty much every website and news article that I could find on it and just obviously compiled it all from there. But it's just horrible to think about what she went through. The one man that's supposed to love you unconditionally, to protect you and look after you, instead beats you, sexually assaults you, and holds you captive for years. All of these cases are just really, really sad. As I said, In a sense, his son was a victim too, because he groomed him into the same kind of thinking. His son was arrested. He felt like it was his right to sexually abuse his children, his daughters, which is just disgusting. And then he passed that mentality on to his son, who abused not only his own sister, but his own, 4 children as well. Giuseppe, who was 41 years old when he was actually caught, had abused his then 34-year-old sister, along with his 4 daughters aged 6, 8, 12, and 20. I just want to say here as well, I don't know how. They say he was groomed, so his father must have pushed those beliefs onto him. In a sense, he was a victim. Yes, okay, he committed crimes too, and so he should serve justice for that. His children didn't deserve that, and it's awful. But what if his father hadn't done that to him and hadn't groomed him? Would he have ever done it? Who knows? That's a question. As I said, this went on undiscovered for 25 years, and it was only uncovered after a tip-off. As a result of this tip-off, police planted these listening devices into their home and into the family's car. That's where they heard the horrific details being discussed. In one chilling transcript read by the police, the 8-year-old girl can be heard saying, "Dad, get your hands off me. You are a bastard. Stop it." And that was coming from an 8-year-old little girl. That is horrific. That poor little girl. When the police heard these, they arrested the pair in March of 2009. Michal was 64 years old at the time of his arrest. Meanwhile, while that was all going on, specially trained psychologists were questioning, obviously, Laura and the 4 children. And they tried to piece together this shocking case of child sex abuse, which was said to be carried out by the father over 25 years. As part of the probe, police officers also investigated whether Michal also sexually abused his brother's daughter during the 1960s. I don't know what came of that, but it wouldn't surprise me if he did. The kind of man he seemed like. Pietro Forno, the prosecutor leading the case, said, "I have dealt with many incest cases, but this is the worst that I've seen because it lasted for 25 years and also because the main victim is 34 years old." He also went on to say that the psychologists back in 1994 should have acted on the signs that they were seeing. He said that he didn't want to blame them, of course, because it wasn't their fault. It was the father's, but it was just unfortunate that the signs were missed and that nothing was done about it at the time. It was said that the interceptions and the recordings proved vital in this case, and they made for shocking listening, as the abuse can quite clearly be heard on the tapes. Now his family really put themselves forward in his defense. They invited the media to the home and they completely denied that he could have had anything to do with this. The girl said that the father never laid a finger on any of them, and that they kissed the ground that he walked on. 2 of his sons were interviewed on Italian TV, and one stated that everything that was said about the father was a lie. Another showed reporters a tattoo of his father and said, "I have always kept my father close to my heart and here on my arm." Katerina, his wife, went on to say that none of it was true. It was all lies and that he was a good man. She said, and I quote, "My husband is in jail for something he didn't do. He kept her inside because he was worried that something might happen to her. He was only looking after his children. What father wouldn't do the same?" Michal's lawyer, Antonio Geneves, made the statement, "My client is incredulous and trying to find some explanation for these allegations," which he denies completely. He's ill, he's diabetic, and after he was arrested, he had to be taken to the hospital in Turin for checks. "I will be appealing immediately for his release from custody." Antonio would go on to claim that Laura was unbalanced, confused and disturbed and making unfounded accusations, that he had not laid a finger on any of his children and that this was an act of rebellion. He said that the transcripts that had been released were not evidence of sexual abuse, that they were merely evidence of a cultural and social degradation that existed within the family. Okay then. He stated that he'd already applied for bail and requested the report on the man's daughter, the psychological reports on the man's daughter and the 4 children. Regardless of these claims, the pair were found guilty of the abuse of Laura and the 4 children. In May 2012, Michal Mongelli was sentenced to 10 years in prison. His son Giuseppe was sentenced to 9 years in prison. And that is all the information I can find on this case. Cases like these are always really shocking. The fact that they can sometimes get away with it for so many years, it just blows your mind. And that she escaped, told authorities, and that they unfortunately didn't believe her. It's just tragic. This case saw many victims traumatized by their own father's hands. All you can hope is that they were eventually able to move on. I know there's going to be trauma and there's going to be scars, but hopefully they can move past it and just live out the rest of their lives free from the torment and the abuse that they were receiving. I truly don't know whether his family knew about it, whether they were in on it and trying to protect him. Your guess is as good as mine on that one. But they backed him up so ferociously. Did that mean that he had never hurt them in any way and they just couldn't believe that he'd done something like that? Or was it just a case of Stockholm Syndrome, where you fall in love with your abuser? And of course he was the father. You only get one, and sometimes no matter what they do, you just love them anyway. Let me know what you guys think in the comments about that. But yeah, that's the end of the case. If you guys have any more suggestions, let me know. I'll look into them for you. Give me a big thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for similar content. Anyway guys, that's all I have today on the Mongelli case. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, bye.